What is up? This is the last and final round 6 of the Community Premodern Series Webcam Leagues. We are rocking Frantic Search. If you don't know what we're doing yet, go back, watch all the other videos in the league. Don't watch the end and spoil it for yourself. Really quick, we're just going to cast a Sapphire Medallion or a Helm of Awakening, use that to generate mana with cards like Frantic Search, and eventually draw through a lot of our deck and cast a Brain Freeze to mill our opponent out. Let's see how we do. Starting off game 1, my opponent fetches for a mountain and throws out a Goblin Patrol. I need a little reminder on what Goblin Patrol does. On my turn, I just play out an island and pass. After paying the echo cost, my opponent comes in for 2 damage, starts the beatdown, and follows up with a Mishra's Factory and a Phyrexian Furnace. I'll play out a Helm of Awakening. I'm hopeful that my opponent doesn't have a lot of colorless spells in their Goblin Patrol deck. That's my assumption, even though I've already seen Phyrexian Furnace, which was a little bit of an odd inclusion. I'm not quite sure what I'm up against yet. I'll take another 2 damage down to 16. Then they play a Rashadam Port and another Goblin Patrol. I'm going to start getting ported down on my upkeep, so I'm glad I have the Helm out at least. My island will get tapped down, keep playing out lands. I'll cast another Helm of Awakening down for 1, because that is basically a free spell followed up with Frantic Search. I was going to tap that land anyway, untap it with Frantic Search. I pitch a couple islands to the grave, which is exactly what you want to be doing with Frantic Search. Swap those out for some more useful cards. The deck is slightly less than 1/3 islands, so there's a good chance that you're going to draw into something more useful. For that, I'm going to follow up with a Merchant Scroll, verifying storm count with the opponent, cast 3 spells this turn. Decide to get a Meditate, focusing on drawing cards right now. That'll draw me 4 cards for 1 mana, which always feels pretty nice. Pay 1 mana to cast that Meditate. Unfortunately, I don't find exactly what I need, so I end up passing the turn, which is really going to be the next 2 turns after Meditate. My opponent will come in for 6 damage with their Mishra's Factory and 2 Goblins. 3 cards left in their hand. These creatures coming in twice over the next couple of turns is going to hurt a lot, so I decide to stem the bleeding a little bit, snap a Goblin back to their hand. That means they don't have any red mana, so they can't replay it this turn. And when they do eventually replay it, they'll have to pay the echo cost, and it won't be able to attack immediately. So this is a way to tie up my opponent's resources and buy myself as much time as possible. I'm just going to also cycle an Accumulated Knowledge to see if there's any other tricks I draw, maybe another snap. This being while my opponent's lands are pretty tapped out. Now, arguably I shouldn't do that in case they decide to just Rashadam Port me. That way I could just do it in response to the Rashadam Port. So there wasn't really a ton of good reasons to cast that AK right there. On my opponent's second turn, they will drop down a Wasteland, means Teferi's Isle lines are cut off unless they tap it down. They decide to attack for 2 damage, leaving that Mishra's Factory left behind. This will put me to 10 life. They get a free Phyrexian Furnace. Then they pay 1 mana for a Tanglewire, which is not what I was expecting versus the Goblin Patrol deck. And because of all of my Helm of Awakenings, that Tanglewire only cost them 1 mana. And they followed up with a Jackal. On my upkeep, there is a Tanglewire trigger, and in response to that, they target an island with Rashadam Port. The thing about Tanglewire is that you have to tap untapped permanents. You can't just float mana in response, because you still need to tap extra things. If you want to tap everything, that's fine, you can float mana, but that's why they Rashadam Ported down the island first. I guess the order didn't really matter in that case, but thankfully, I have an island in hand, and I can always untap my lands later in the turn if I have the right spells. But that is not the case this time. I cast a free Sapphire Medallion and pass the turn back. I throw down the Sapphire, which it was free, so I could have held it for Storm. The only thing that's going to help me cast is a full cost Deep Analysis. But this way I just have 1 more artifact to tap for Tanglewire, which lets you tap artifacts. So hopefully I can just tap all of my mana rocks for Tanglewire next turn. My opponent is going to attack for big damage, 3 creatures. I'll go down to 4 life. My opponent casts an Incinerate and follows it up with a Lightning Bolt. Right, so they had it all. Tanglewire definitely took me off guard. But my opponent is commenting right here while we're cleaning up that how he thought I got it. But so I show him what my hand was. It was 3 islands and then 3 mana rocks. Those were the cards I was drawing. So I think I'll agree with my opponent. That was on the worst side of luck. Game 1. On to game 2. At least I get to be on the play. And I open up with an island. My opponent drops a Mog Fanatic. The Fanatic will definitely give me a little more breathing room in my life total, but unfortunately it does impact my ability to stick a Cloud of Faeries and snap. They get a free Phyrexian Furnace out of my Helm of Awakening, and then look my gift horse in the mouth by immediately overloading the helm. Me for 1 damage with Mog Fanatic and pass the turn. Cast an Opt, hunting for something to do at this point. I bottom the card to keep digging, and I find something nice, casting out a Sapphire Medallion, which I'd much rather have in play compared to the Helm of Awakening, especially with all these Tanglewires and things floating around. Opponent runs out of Wasteland and hits me for 1, so Teferi's Isle will be offline again. And they throw down a Jackal Pup. With 3 lands and a Sapphire Medallion, I have everything I need to try to win, if the cards in hand are right. Start off by just cycling an AK for one card. It's probably not a great sign that I have it all put together yet, but at least it's not 3 islands, 3 mana rocks like it was game 1. I just drop another Helm and pass the turn. Hopefully I can untap, do some powerful things with Frantic Searches and Meditates. My opponent plays another Wasteland and swings in for 3 damage with his creatures, and plays another Jackal Pup, leaning much more into the aggro than the prison side of things this game. I think I don't mind the aggressive side of the opponent's deck because the other half is the prison, so they can't follow up all these creatures with infinite burn spells. Certainly they have some, and they incinerate Lightning Bolted us last game. I cast a hard cast Deep Analysis for only 2 mana. 2 mana draw 2 is pretty good by most standards. They attempt to Red Elemental Blast it. The argument for this kind of matchup, Deep Analysis, sideboard it out, since that flashback costs you so much life. I will Hydroblast their Red Elemental Blast and draw a couple cards. I really don't know why my opponent would choose to use their counterspell on Deep Analysis. I guess they think they're looking at me that I have nothing, and so just trying to stop me from drawing into something and just get another turn to win with. But I'd much rather use that on one of my untappers, or just something more powerful than a spell I'm about to flashback for 1 mana, which I do right now, putting myself to 12 life, drawing a couple more cards. Opponent is showing me their cards in grave. I'm just doing a little math. It's easier to count the cards that have been drawn already than to have someone sit there and count their whole deck. I end up passing the turn with 1 island untapped, which has a lot of possibilities for me. I have a Meditate in hand. They do end up sacrificing that Mog Fanatic to kill the fairy, but I have a Meditate in hand, so I'm kind of waiting things out, seeing if there's any reason for me to cast it on my opponent's turn, if that would be better, or what. Probably not in this case, given my life total, but as a last resort, I can do that. Really, I'm just hoping to untap and use that Meditate. Now my opponent makes a huge mistake. They pass the turn, and then waiting for my upkeep to try to cast their Overload on my Sapphire Medallion. I have no idea why they would wait on this. Maybe they thought I had counter magic and they just wanted to try to force me to tap extra mana on my turn, but you're about to see what I can do, what Frantic Storm can do on the stack. So in response to the Overload, I throw out that Meditate. They attempt to Pyroblast it. We're already up to Storm 3. 2 of those are my opponents. In response to that, I cast a Words to Wisdom. I draw a couple cards. My opponent draws 1, but they only have Wastelands untapped right now, so I'm not worried about anything they can cast, other than maybe a Fire Blast, but I don't think they're that kind of deck. I cast another Words to Wisdom, just hunting for more cards. So I'm drawing another couple cards. I've drawn 4 cards and Meditate hasn't even resolved yet, and I haven't even drawn for turn. Frantic Search means I'm going to untap, draw yet another 2 cards, up to 6 total cards drawn this turn, all during my upkeep in response to that overload. I end up discarding 2 islands. I don't have another island in hand at this point, so I was looking to hopefully play something in my first main phase. Ultimately, I decide that I'm probably going to draw into another island off of this Meditate, or at least I'm crossing my fingers hoping for it. And so I discard all my islands, and then amongst all those cards I drew, I do find the Hydroblast to counter the Pyroblast. Meditate resolves. I'm up to 10 cards drawn this upkeep. And I'll pay 1 more mana for yet another Frantic Search, taking advantage of my double mana rocks while I still can. I'll discard Teferi's Isle and Merchant Scroll. Untap 3 lands. That's 12 cards drawn this turn. And finally, that overload will resolve. And finally, I will draw for turn. All of this made possible by the fact that my opponent waited until my upkeep to cast the overload. Again, I don't really know what the logic or rationale was there. Maybe they felt confident with their Pyroblast backup, but it was very strange. They should have just done it on their turn before I untapped and had everything available to me. At this point, the first spell I am casting during the main phase here is just Brain Freeze, because we did everything on the stack for my upkeep. This is Storm 9 Brain Freeze for 27 cards. I have the other Brain Freeze in hand already, but I just use this as an opportunity to scope out my opponent's deck, and I find out that they are running Pillage, if not the main, at least the side. That was my first thought when I saw the deck, that this was a mono red Ponza deck, but it's more of a prison deck, so I think that Pillage probably came in from the side to try to deal with my artifacts. But who knows? I'll be looking forward to checking out my opponent's deck list when it's released. I cast the second Brain Freeze, and that's the game. To be clear, I might have won anyway if they had used their overload on their turn, but it certainly made my life a heck of a lot easier. On to game 3. Opponent opens up with Goblin Patrol yet again. I like this better than a Jackal Pup. At least it costs them some extra mana. Colored mana at that. I have a tricky decision because of the hand that I kept. It only had a Teferi's Isle and an island in play. I have a mana rock that I'd like to get out, and I ultimately decide to turn 1 play the Teferi's Isle, which means I will get it untapped turn 3 to potentially help me play out my spells. This does mean I will not be able to turn to a mana rock, assuming that I would find the 3rd land. I do have an opt, which I am going to end up casting to try to help me find that 3rd island. Spoiling my plans of the big turn 3 Teferi Isle is a Rashad Port from my opponent, and the prison walls start closing in and choking me out immediately. I will at least cast that opt, try to find more lands. My Teferi's Isle will phase in, but it'll immediately get tapped down. I think about casting a spell with that mana, get some sort of value out of my Teferi's Isle. It only comes up every couple of turns, so unless I get something out of it in the upkeep, that's always going to be what my opponent Rashad ports. So it's now or never, or play something that untaps it. I don't have anything that works at instant speed, unfortunately, so I just have to go to my draw step. I do at least find the other island. I'll pay 2 mana, throw out a Sapphire Medallion, and then pass the turn. I have 6 cards in hand. At the end of my turn, they overload the Sapphire Medallion anyway. What I was really looking for was turn 3, use that 2nd island to play Sapphire Medallion with Teferi's Isle untapped, and use that to have a turbo combo turn with lots of mana, cheap spells. But that Rashad Port really ruined my day. And on top of that, they had the overload. On top of all that, my opponent also has a Tanglewire, and because half of my turns are going to be 1 land down, this is going to be especially difficult for me to break out of. So I'm really only going to have those turns with Teferi's Isle in as a chance to do anything. I at least am able to do something this turn and use that mana for accumulated knowledge on my upkeep. So kind of ignore the Tanglewire, but it's not necessarily the spell that I would have wanted to play. At this point, I both need to find a mana rock if I don't already have one, and then somehow find an opportunity to cast it. Hoping to keep playing out lands to have something untapped when I go to main phase. Right now, everything is still getting tapped down between Tanglewire and Rashad Import, so the only thing I can do is cast Instance. Opponent fetches, and they attack in with their Goblin Patrol. I go to 12 life. On my turn, I get to untap, upkeep, Teferi's Isle, 3 islands in play, and this is where I make probably the biggest mistake of the match, because what I can do is I can tap. I have a Frantic Search in hand. I could tap all of my lands, float 5 mana, let the Tanglewire trigger resolve, then use that to cast Frantic Search, untap 3 lands, which would give me 4 mana theoretically available. Use that mana to cast anything I draw, and of course the Teferi's Eye will still get tapped down by the Rashad Import, but that would give me a bunch of mana to cast any of my instants right now, and importantly, 2 lands untapped going into my main phase, which I could use to cast a Mana Rock. I decide that this is not the turn to do that. I don't want to just throw away a Frantic Search just to cast a Mana Rock. I want to play out that Mana Rock first so I can get some extra value out of that Frantic Search, and that was just a huge misplay on my part. At this point, I don't know when I'm actually going to be able to play out that Mana Rock and my other spells the way I want. Opponent is going to keep swinging in, animating their lands to attack, but holding up Rashad Import. On my upkeep, I'm going to have to tap down 2 to Tanglewire. I simply don't really have anything to cast at instant speed, and at this point, this is mistake number 2 because I forgot that Rashad Import was going to tap down another island. It's similar to the last upkeep mistake, but a little less bad because really I should have taken advantage of that Teferi's Isle while I had the chance. At this point, I just have to pass the turn. If I had top decked an island, things would be different. I would have been able to play out my Mana Rock, assuming they don't have another overload. But I've got a full 7 in hand. If I can just untap, everything will be fine. However, my opponent plays a second Rashad Import, which spoils things a little. So I get to untap, upkeep with my Teferi's Isle phased in. I'm going to lose one of those islands to Tanglewire, and then I'm going to use the Rashad Import to tap down Teferi's Isle. I'm just going to use that 2 blue to throw out a Words of Wisdom, try to find some more action spells. And I get another island tapped after that. Play out another island, so I have 3 untapped now. The issue right now is that what I would love to do more than anything else is just cast a Mana Rock and throw out my Cloud of Faeries. However, they have 1 red mana up, and they are representing a red elemental blast, a pyroblast, and if that Cloud of Faeries gets countered, that's it. My turn is over, I'm at 4 life, they're going to win. So I need to play with Hydroblast mana available up while untapping lands and trying to find some way to generate enough advantage to both cast a Mana Rock, have enough mana to cast an untapper, and have some protection. I put my fairy into the graveyard by accident because I was just thinking about it as a purely existing to generate mana. I didn't have snaps on my deck anymore at this point. I felt it was too easy for my opponent with all their burn spells to kill Cloud of Faeries, so I wasn't going to count on snap being useful. It's one of our worst spells because it relies on having a creature in play. It doesn't do anything on its own, so it can be a dead draw sometimes. I'd rather have those Hydroblasts. Pay 3 mana for that full-costed Frantic Search. And normally Frantic Search can net 1, 2, even 3 mana sometimes, but in this case it's only worth 1, since at least we have Teferi's Isle in play. And all of this at last turn when I didn't try to do anything was I thought I was going to be okay because I was going to have 1 more mana, and that second Rashad Import really threw me off. So now I'm finally able to cast that Helm of Awakening after I cast all my untappers, which is simply not the order you want to do things. I'm trying to find some way through to keep the game going. What I really need is to draw more untappers. So I end up paying 1, then flashbacking with deep analysis, putting myself to 1 life. In response, my opponent will use their last red mana to try to incinerate. I will throw out that Hydroblast I've been holding back for just such an occasion, and draw 2, trying to just find a Cloud of Faeries at this point. Frantic Search won't do it because I need 2 mana floating. I was really hoping, at this point I'd take whatever, I was really hoping that I was going to be able to play a Frantic Search if I drew it. That's why I sequence my spells like this, but I was forced to Hydroblast. So at this point, my only out is a Cloud of Faerie. Thankfully, I'm at least not dead on board because I have a Cloud of Faeries that can block. So I don't find what I need with the Deep Analysis, and I have to pass it back. When I untap, I won't have that Teferi's Island play, assuming I do untap. I'm only at 1 life. My opponent activates a Mishra's Factory and swings in, and so I make the only play I can play, which is to block the factory and then throw another Hydroblast at that creature. Just doing whatever I can, trying to buy 1 more turn. I've already wasted a lot of untapped spells, especially because there's no snaps. So I've already used up some of my Cloud of Faeries and Frantic Searches, and I've burned a lot of equity on my Storm count. And my opponent plays another Tanglewire and a Jackal Pup. My opponent has 0 cards at this point. That is everything they have. Unfortunately, this is a non-Teferi Isle turn, so I am down 1 land versus the full stacked Tanglewire. They will Rashad Import on top of that. I do not have enough action spells to go off with 1 land. I could just hope to draw a Cloud of Faeries. I don't have another island in hand. What I end up doing is just using all those islands to cast a Meditate, with my only out again being Cloud of Faeries, but this time I also need to find an island to play it with. I do find an island and that Cloud of Faeries, so the luck streak is coming for now. I've got a small glimmer of hope here, but this is only what I needed to be able to start my turn at all. I thought I was going to be sitting pretty with a bunch of islands untapped, but I am extremely choked down right now. I need a very lucky string to be able to pull something off. At this point, I need to get extremely lucky. That's my only option. I have at least 1 Cloud of Faeries left in deck. I will cast that Accumulated Knowledge, draw 2 cards, hoping to find some way to chain things together. And I find the Frantic Search, but that is simply 1 mana too much. If I had 1 more mana available, my opponent drew 1 less Rashad Import, there was 1 less Tanglewire trigger. If I had that Teferi's Isle just to even tap down to the Tanglewire, I could have pulled it off, but unfortunately I missed my window where I really could have tried to set myself up for the long term, and that came to bite me several turns later. That is an end to round 6 and the monthly league, for me at least, because we definitely don't make top 8 with this record, but let's do a little recap. Alright, so this is how we ended up doing with the league, 6 rounds. A lot of 1-2s that probably could have gone either way. It's the lands deck that was just there was a few points of spots of unlucky gameplay in this league, but getting matched up against the turn 2 Mana Breach deck was definitely probably some of the worst of the luck. So that was just going to be an automatic loss, unfortunately. It was nice that we were able to take out land still. Unfortunately, you couldn't see one of the 2 wins of this league because the recording wasn't working. But essentially, especially with all our accumulated knowledges, etc., I mean, they have only so much blue mana available, and we're pretty quickly able to overwhelm them with our spells to outcard advantage them. Even a moderately placed land still win is going to take many, many turns, after which time we've already dropped all of our Helms, our Sapphires. We're just going to be able to cast so many spells for so cheap that they're not going to be able to catch up to us. There was a lot of Black Vice and the Rack in this league, so a lot of decks were caring if we had a lot or little cards in hand, and even my deck wants to draw a lot of cards. That was a pretty polarizing impact. We do get some of the brunt of the anti-Stifle Knot sideboard cards with the Artifact Hate, unfortunately, but the Artifact Hate wasn't too bad. We saw a lot of Cabal Therapies, but those were mostly coming out of Moneyball. the rack didn't hit us too bad with the discard, even though they were trying. I'm not sure if I'm just calling it the rack. I don't know if it was actually pit rack, because I never saw a bottomless pit. Bottomless pit can certainly be a big problem if we have to keep discarding every turn, just like those Hypnotic Specters. But again, even then, they were just moving so slowly they didn't power anything out with a Dark Ritual. That was fine. The Stasis was a fun matchup. Sorry, I'm going out of order, just talking as thoughts are occurring to me. The Stasis was definitely a fun matchup. They're probably favored versus us. They get to play the Brain Freeze plan, but take advantage of all of our Storm and have way more counter magic than us. There are some lines we can take to try to play around them that they cannot, but ultimately that was very tough. But Stasis is always a very fun match to play against. And then finally, Red Prison. A lot of just unexpected deck lists this match. The Tanglewires threw me for a loop. Got extremely unlucky game one. I still feel, maybe even my opponent said, and then got lucky game two in the sense that my opponent, I think, made a mistake with that overload during my upkeep. And then game three, it was just a slog, and I think I just didn't keep my focus up versus all those Rashad Ports and Tanglewires, and I missed my key windows of opportunity where I could have tried to do something. All right, well, that's a wrap. I'm probably going to play something different to mix it up a little bit in the July League. So leave a comment down below if you think of any good combo decks you want me to run out. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this league. Stay subscribed for more gameplay, more leagues, more webcam leagues. I'm going to try to record some other games with a friend, paper webcam games, to try to mix it up a little bit. Check out the rest of the series if you haven't done already. Subscribe, leave a like, and we'll see you next time.